Once again, you've made the right turn. You made the right move. You turned your hot rod Ford onto Route 66. And you're ready for the show. Hi, I'm Stan Houston, and this is Two Lane Tales. And Bob Boze and Stuart Rosebrook will introduce you to the man who knows the road and the cars that rode on it and raced on it. Let's go.
Well, if you ever plan to go to west, Jack, take my way, that's the highway, that's the best. It's okay on Route 66.
Thank you, Stan. Welcome to another episode of Two Lane Tales. Today, I'm Stuart Rosebrook with Bob Boze and our special guest, Max McCoy, who's joining us from Emporia, Kansas. And we're going to discover about a little bit about Max, who's the executive director of the Western Writers of America, who's the son of the Mother Road. And we're going to learn all about growing up on Route 66 on the other side of the country from Bob Boze, who's the son of the Mother Road from Kingman, Arizona. Bob and Max, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. And Max, I'm so excited because you represent a part of the road that we went on every summer when we went to the family farm in Iowa. But I'm really curious about if you guys did the same kind of shenanigans we did out in Kingman Way. And by that, I mean, did you ever maybe race a car going really fast at night, get in trouble?
A time or two.
You're going to need a little more detail, young man.
I will.
Tell us about what kind of car you had. Let's start there.
Well, let me say, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Stuart, thank you. And Bob, thank you. I'm delighted to be a guest. And I've thought about whether I should talk about my drag racing days. And I'll add this to a long line of bad decisions I made in my life. I will talk about it. So I did my fair share of racing growing up. My dad had a service station on Route 66 in Baxter Springs, out on the curve, out where Route 66 goes toward Oklahoma. And as part of that, I always learned to work on cars. And so I had a couple different cars that I raced. Built them myself. When I was 14, I was changing head gaskets in cars, and by the time I was 15 and 16, I was, beefing up motors and stuff. So the fastest car I had was a 1968 GTO, and it had
that's classic, dude.
Yeah, it had a 400 cubic inch engine. And I would go out and race it. I actually grew up not too far from Route 66, 2 blocks south in Baxter Springs of the road on the other end of town from where my dad's filling station was. But that, and by the way, Route 66, Kansas has only 13 miles of Route 66. And I think I drove every inch of that in my youth and raced quite a bit of it. There was a big curve that went out to a rainbow bridge north of Baxter, and we would race out there. There was a quarter-mile strip that us kids we'd painted on the asphalt. We raced out there. But yeah, I raced the 68 GTO quite a bit. It was quite impressive. It was an automatic, which was unusual for me. I favor manuals, but this automatic in this car, you could be going down the road at 50 miles an hour and punch it, and it would get rubber. It would smoke the tires at 50, so that's kind of impressive. So I'll always remember that. So we'd go out and we'd race on 66, and I later also had a 1967 Mustang that I put together and built. It was a 4-speed, had the 4-speed Hurst shifter and the whole thing. It wasn't quite as fast as the GTO, but the GTO was something else.
Let's set the stage here. When you say I raced in Kingman, what would happen is that most of the guys in town knew each other, and or let's meet out at the drag strip. And then every once in a while, people would, muscle would come in from out of town, and the word would get around. There's some guys in town looking for, a race from Boulder City, or they'd come up from Needles. Did you have that where people coming around the vacation, and so people were looking for you?
We did. We had quite a bit of competition from Joplin, Missouri, which is on 66 on the other end of or on the east end, about 15 miles away. Most of our races were spontaneous, though. We would meet at night, either go from the Hamburger Shack out to the old Route 66 and race there. It really probably doesn't sound as nearly as organized as your situation in Kingman.
So you didn't have a quarter mile marked off and you didn't start from scratch. You were just pulling up next to somebody and gunning it.
No, we did have a quarter mile marked off, and people would pull up next to us down on Military and challenge us to race. Then we'd go out to the quarter mile and we'd race out there. So
tell us, did you ever get beat by? You couldn't believe it?
Oh yeah, I got beat a lot of times. Got beat by plenty of Camaros. A lot of lighter cars. The GTO had plenty of horsepower and plenty of torque, but it just couldn't compete with a Camaro that someone had jammed a 427 in or something like that. But now,
we had a guy in our town, Billy Logus, and he's legendary. And people would come from other towns and ask for him by name, and they would race. And I always heard a story, and maybe you can add some expertise to it, and that is he did a race against a Corvette. He had a Dodge, super stock Dodge, and he lost, and he was so angry he drove home. His father had a mechanic shop, kind of like your dad, and he put a loose transmission in the trunk and came back and re-raced the guy and won because he felt like his back end was too light and he wasn't getting traction. Have you heard of that?
I haven't heard of putting a transmission in the rear end. What I did know is that some people put quicksilver, mercury, in the rear ends of the cars in this tube that would flow slowly from one end to the other and would stabilize the rear end. So that's probably the closest to that.
Hey, Bob, I just want to ask you.
Idea of a victory where you smoke somebody's doors off.
You want me to talk about a victory?
Yeah, give us a taste of. And by the way, we're the car.
Hey, Bob, I just need to have you stabilize where you're sitting. We're getting a little reverb. I don't know if you're moving around, but you're just as we before.
I'm not doing anything. I'm stationary. I'm not moving a thing.
Okay, just getting a little just trying to do a little tech work here as we're talking race cars on Route 66. So
okay. A time that I won. Well, Bob, I'll tell you about a time that I won and also lost at the same time. It was about 2:00 in the morning, sometime in the mid-'70s. I had the GTO, and this GTO was easy to spot. A lot of people knew it. It was Corvette yellow. I had it painted Corvette yellow. It had the judge stripes and the spoiler on the back. So it was 2:00 in the morning on Route 66, north out of Miami, Oklahoma. It was deserted, and this black 442 pulled up and challenged me. The 442 had Oklahoma license plates on it. So we punched it. We were off like rockets, and it's a good thing there was no one on the road. It's a little cringy to think about how fast we were going now. There was a highway patrol trooper sitting in the cemetery along the road that clocked me at 142 miles an hour. Yeah. Thinking about the tires we had back then, it's a wonder I survived this era of my life. But anyway, the trooper hit his lights and came after us, but we were so far ahead of him that me and the 442 did not see him. Now, I beat the 442, and then we slowed down, and then we come up to Commerce, Oklahoma, and there's a roadblock in the middle of the road. And they, we stopped, we pulled over, and they were waiting for us. The trooper had radioed ahead. And so I got nabbed and got charged and spent the night in the jail in Miami, Oklahoma. So I would say I lost there. It was an interesting experience. The trooper, it still took him a couple of minutes to catch up with us in Commerce. So that's probably the best example of one of the races. All my friends knew this. Had some friends who tried to help bail me out of jail at the time, and it was, to think about those days are gone, right? We'll never revisit those, but I did a lot of what Stuart called hijinks on Route 66. That's probably the best example of that. Just glad nobody got hurt.
And what about the other driver, Max?
Oh, he got thrown in jail too. Yep. Yeah, we both did.
Did you ever see him again after getting?
Nope. I knew his name. I talked to him after that, but we didn't keep in touch. But he had a pretty nice 442. It ran pretty good. So give me a run.
So then I have to ask you, what do you drive now?
I stopped driving fast cars a few years ago, and I drive Jeep Wranglers now, because the places I want to go, the fast cars just won't make it up those mountain trails. So I've been driving Jeeps for about 20 years. I still have a 67 Mustang in the garage. It's a 67 Fastback Candy Apple Red. 4-speed Hurst shifter, 289 high performance, 9-inch rear end. It's the last car that my dad and I worked on before he died, so I'm pretty attached to it. But that car does not get out much these days.
I just love you spewing out all the mechanics and the numbers. There's just only people that grew up on Route 66 and like muscle cars can do that. It's just a joy to hear, by the way.
Well, and I think Bob, we're going to have to get Max on the phone. We'll get Jim Hinckley on here, and we'll have just an auto talk. We'll have a car talk and all the details, and maybe Harshberger. If we can convince Harshberger to get online, because you guys are going to talk all shop stuff. But I wanted to bring something up here in this first segment, and then it'll launch us into our next conversation, and that is when you started describing, Max, your childhood in Baxter Springs, Kansas, and growing up the son of a service station owner. I don't think I knew that, and Bob didn't know that, and you two have something in common that we're going to discuss in the next segment, and we're going to take a break for our sponsors, and we'll be right back on Two Lane Tales with Bob Bozbell and Max McCoy.
Hi, this is Bob Bozbell, and if you want to have an inside track on two of the most famous characters in the West, that would be Wyatt Earp and his compadre, Doc Holliday, then you need to pick up the Illustrated Life and Times of Wyatt Earp and the Illustrated Life and Times of Doc Holliday, revised third edition. Now, these are books that I first published back in 1993. They've been in the fourth, fifth edition. They keep selling out, and there's a reason. I included the best maps and the best timeline to give you an overview of who these guys really were. And that means the truth, warts and all. I don't duck any of the stuff because these are controversial cats, you may know, if you've ever seen a movie on them. But I've heavily, profusely illustrated. I've updated them. There's a couple of mistakes that were made, or new evidence has come out, and in each edition, I've updated it and made them better. So check it out. That's Bob Bozbell's Illustrated Life and Times of Wyatt Earp and the Illustrated Life and Times of Doc Holliday, both available to order with an autograph at the66kids.com. And I guarantee that if my signature is in these books someday, they'll be worth the cover price.
We're back on Two Lane Tales with Bob Boze Bell and Max McCoy, and we are talking about racing and cars and growing up on Route 66. And we've discovered today that Bob and Max have something in common, and that is fathers who owned service stations on Route 66. So, Bob, tell us a little backstory about your childhood in Kingman, and then Max, we want to hear all about your dad and your family life there in Baxter Springs, growing up the son of a service station owner.
Well, Max, I hope you can appreciate this, but my father had Al Bell's Flying A in downtown Kingman on a hilltop, actually. And the wintertime was kind of slow, but come about Memorial Day, he would hire 3 extra guys. And, of course, they all had uniforms with their name over the heart. And 4 guys would meet every car. I was a kid that iced jugs, so I was the 5th guy. And did your dad have a station like that? And, by the way, what brand was it?
It was a Phillips station.
Phillips 66. I'll be there.
Yeah, you bet. My dad's station wasn't quite as big as yours. He was a carpet salesman for most of his career. He bought the station and ran it for a few years there on Route 66. Ended up, frankly, losing the station. He was about as good a businessman as I am. So nothing against him. I loved him dearly, but he just wasn't cut out for the business side of it, I think. But my formative years growing up, the service station, it was really a 1 or 2 man operation at the most. He did do mechanic work, and that's where I learned to do mechanic work is from him. And to this day, I still feel guilty if I take anything in to get it fixed by someone else, because I hear my dad's voice saying, "Yeah, you could fix that." And so I tackle a lot of projects that I shouldn't these days, because cars have changed so much, with everything's computer, etc. But I still work on the Wranglers, pretty easy to work on. But even, my dad grew up during the Depression, so he had a Depression era worldview of things, and that is, if you couldn't fix it yourself, you don't deserve to own it. And he also had that view that you are a success if you have enough to eat and your family has enough to eat. That was his yardstick. He passed that along to me, and and that's my definition of success still. To this day, because everything else sort of pales in comparison to that. And I feel very lucky to have had those experiences and have had him as a dad. He taught me a lot of things that maybe just people don't learn these days about cars, etc. Even when somebody has to jump a car, etc. People will ask me for advice, my friends, etc., which is okay. I'm happy to do it.
There's so many skills that were service station oriented, like balancing tires. Did you ever do that, where you put the tire on the meter and then you put weights until it was balanced, and that would hopefully save the tire? Did you ever do that?
Not only balanced tires, but I mounted and dismounted tires manually. The job. Yeah. So did a lot of that. So when I was 14, I told you I was working on pretty heavy duty stuff when I was 14. I remember when I was 14, I was working on an Oldsmobile. I was replacing the head gasket, and I leaned over and heard something snap, and I cracked a rib. Actually working on the car when I was 14, and that was pretty painful. So I learned not to lean over the hood that way and try to pick up the cylinder head. So
one of the things that we had to look out for was sleepers, they were called, and that is, in the summertime it was so warm that cars would come in all day, and people would say, "Hey, check my radiator." Well, what would happen is you'd go and you turn the radiator one notch where it wouldn't come off completely, and if it was okay, if you didn't get any pressure, you'd completely turn it one more notch, and then the radiator cap would come off. Well, what would happen is it was so hot that all that water would sink to the bottom like a geyser, and it was called a sleeper because it didn't seem to have pressure. And as soon as you took that off and looked in, a geyser of 114 water would hit you in the face. Did you ever do that?
Well, I never had it hit me in the face, so came close a couple of times. Of course, when you pop that radiator cap and relieve that pressure, then the boiling point of water changes when it's no longer under pressure. So it can be pretty unpredictable.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And we used to get, I don't know if you had this, we used to get runners, and that's when our gas was the unbelievably ungodly communist price of $45.9 for Ethel. And people would come in, and we had those long bells, those rubber hoses that would go on the driveway. So if we were in the lube room, changing a tire or working on a valve or something, and all of a sudden you hear this ding, 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 ding. And so we'd wipe off our hands, and we'd all head out the lube room. Well, often as not, we'd hear it again, ding, 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 and they were leaving because they thought we were highway robbery because we were trying to sell gas for $45.9. Did you ever have a runner?
I don't remember that. I do remember the rubber hoses, and I used to jump up and down on the damn thing and make it ding, and it would drive my dad crazy. What I do remember is that my dad would encounter things like, people would try to trade cars, and they'd do things like put sawdust in the transmission to try to hide the sound of a bad transmission to get it sold, etc. Where we were on 66 was really an extension of, West 7th Street in Joplin comes straight out that 66, and then 15 miles down the road, there's Baxter Springs. But when I was growing up, I read The Grapes of Wrath, and I read that chapter about the used cars on 7th Street in The Grapes of Wrath. And frankly, it hadn't changed much by the 70s. The cars had changed, but there still were lots and lots of car dealerships along that route, and lots of places you probably didn't want to do business. So, I feel lucky to have been there and grown up in that, because it's not just a historical legacy. It's also, in many ways, a literary and cultural legacy. From John Steinbeck, in The Grapes of Wrath, talking about, 7th Street in Joplin, and then to Bonnie and Clyde, who tore up that entire area. And I remember when the Bonnie and Clyde movie came out. When was that? 67. That my parents went to see it, and they got very nostalgic, and they got very it's a bloody, it's a frightening movie in many ways, but they had a really odd reaction, not only to the violence but also to the look. They said, yeah, this is the way it looked when we grew up.
You know what, Max? I think you've hit on something pretty important, and I never thought of it till just now. And when you said that, and that is, I think Bonnie and Clyde opened up the door to when we were growing up. When I was growing up, I used to read True West magazine, and because it had all the outlaws in it, cowboys, and I remember thinking, well, nothing like that ever happens in modern times. And I think Bonnie and Clyde opened up the door to. That was the outlaws that rode in cars, and it's a direct extension of the Wild West.
Oh, absolutely. Wellman's book talks about this quite a bit. How the move from to motor vehicles. Of course, Clyde Barrow. There's the famous story about him writing the letter to Henry Ford saying, your Ford V8 beats them all, and it's my favorite. Now, Ford V8s were Clyde's favorite, but there's some doubt to whether he actually authored that letter or whether it was a fake. But yeah, there is a tradition that continues there. And I just read a book about Bonnie and Clyde that is their family story, and I'm sorry I can't remember the title, but Nelson Allegren wrote the preface to that book, and he's talking about this very thing, about the cultural tradition of the outlaw continuing with Bonnie and Clyde. And then, I worked at the Joplin Globe. One of my first jobs as a journalist, my second job as a journalist, was a reporter at the Joplin Globe. Joplin Globe was just a couple blocks away from Route 66 in Joplin, and that's where they developed the photographs. When Bonnie and Clyde had the shootout in April of 1933, where the cops caught them in the little garage apartment in South Joplin, and they shot their way out, they left a lot of stuff behind. And one of the things they left behind was this camera. They had all these pictures of Bonnie and Clyde, and they're mugging for the camera, they're pointing guns at each other, etc. That was developed in the Joplin Globe darkroom.
I'll be damned. And of course, that when they were finally gunned down by Hamer, they found a copy in the back seat of the Saga of Billy the Kid by Walter Noble Burns.
I did not know that. So you think about all of that, and of course, after they left Joplin, after Bonnie and Clyde, after the shootout, and they got away from Joplin, they pretty much followed 66 all the way, I believe it was to Amarillo, in their flight from Joplin. And Joplin was the turning point from them. The pictures proved, I think, instrumental to law enforcement in tracking them down. For one, it had the first really great pictures of them and their gang, but also the types of cars they like to drive and what their armaments were, including, as I recall, Clyde's fondness for the BARs that were stolen from the National Guard armories.
Yeah.
I think this is a great topic here.
One of the closest encounters I ever had with those guys is I was going to the University of Arizona in Tucson, and I'm reading a book. I was in an apartment on 2nd Avenue, about 3 blocks from the university, and I'm reading a book on John Dillinger, and it's about him being captured in Tucson, which they put a trunk into a storage area, and the guy who was manning the booth there at the storage shed, actually a big warehouse, he was reading A True Detective, and he said, that guy looks like one of these guys, And so the cops descend upon his apartment, and I'm reading this, and he said he was in a rented bungalow at 920 East 2nd Avenue, and I do a double take, and I get up and I walk to the door, and I was at 922, and it was the house next door where I was reading the story. How's that for close? Can you top that?
That's good. Well, let me think for a minute. The book that I mentioned, the Wellman book, the Paul Wellman book, A Dynasty of Western Outlaws. I really recommend it. Talks about the transition from the outlaws of the 1860s and the 1870s to the 1930s. Can I top that? I can't top that story, but my grandfather probably could. There was a 1930s outlaw by the name of Wilbur Underhill. Not as famous as Bonnie and Clyde, but pretty famous in our area. And in the Depression, my family lived in the same block as the family. And one day, my grandfather came out of the house in Joplin, and a guy grabbed him and pulled him aside and said, we nearly shot you dead. We thought you were Wilbur Underhill. If you look around you, there were all of these cops in the bushes, heavily armed, trying to catch Wilbur Underhill. So my grandfather was nearly shot dead and mistaken for Wilbur Underhill.
I can't top this story. That's a great story.
Well, I think we have another episode here that we're going to have to get Max back on. We're going to talk about the outlaws of Route 66. This is a great new topic. And we're going to take a break here for our sponsors and come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about what Max has been doing, what he's been working on, new books coming up in his life, what he's been, his work with Western Riders of America. And we're going to talk a little bit more about cars and working at gas stations on Route 66.
Hi, I'm Max McCoy, and I'm Executive Director of the Western Riders of America. And this June, we are having our annual convention in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So if you're interested in hearing about tales of the Old West, or perhaps interested in learning how to write tales about the Old West, I urge you to check out our convention schedule, which can be found at www.westernriders.org. Look for convention, and our convention begins on June the 18th. Hope to see you in Tulsa.
We're back on Two Lane Tales with Bob Boze and Max McCoy. We've been talking about cars, outlaws, racing, and I think we need to talk a little bit about diners and a little bit of where American graffiti meets the Mother Road. And I think we're fortunate today to have both Max and Bob on the show because they both grew up, they're the real deal. When you sit down and talk with Max McCoy and Bob Boze, you're getting the real stories of growing up on Route 66. You know, I can add my 2 bits about growing up in Santa Monica and Los Angeles, as well as working at a gas station in Glendale, California. And but you guys are the real deal growing up on the road. And I thought we'd talk a little bit about what it was like working in your father's service stations. I have some thoughts about working in a gas station, what I learned, but I know that Bob's father was in World War II and, of course, grew up in the Depression and grew up in Iowa, and then ended up in raising Bob and married with Bob's mother, who was Bobby Guess, who was from Mojave County. Max, tell us a little bit about your family, how their roots there in Missouri and the Kansas-Oklahoma borderlands, and if your father came home from the war and pursued his craft, his career, you said as a carpet salesman and as an owner of a gas station.
Sure. Our family came from Christian County, Missouri, which is deep in the Ozarks, and they arrived in Joplin around the turn of the 20th century. My dad grew up in Joplin, went to school there. As I said, it was during the Depression, and then he joined the Navy. Was assigned to the battleship Pennsylvania and spent most of the war on the Pennsylvania. He manned a typewriter. He was a yeoman typing up orders and stuff. So he had some interesting stories of all of that. His dad had been a foreman in the lead and zinc mines in Missouri. So we kind of had an engineering mechanical background. My uncle was the city engineer for Joplin, Missouri for many years. So that was sort of the background with that. I'm trying to think about how I should put this. Because this is another story that reveals probably a side of me that I didn't really want to talk about, but I will anyway, because I will throw caution to the wind. Growing up in Baxter Springs, of course, it was like growing up in the Depression, because, like I said, my dad had grown up during the Depression. He had passed along the idea of frugality and fix it yourself, and so I had these cars, and one of the cars I raced was a 67 Mustang, and sometimes the police would chase me, and sometimes they would catch me. And one time they did catch me after I'd had a mechanical failure, and they hauled me back and put me in jail, and I spent the night in Baxter Springs. And you asked about cafes and diners along the route. Well, in Baxter, there was a very famous cafe called Murphy's Restaurant, and was a favorite place of ours to eat. But also, I can tell you that the food at the Baxter Springs jail in the mid 1970s came from Murphy's Restaurant, because I know, because I had it, because they brought it to me while I was in jail after the police caught me for racing. So Murphy's was pretty famous. I loved Murphy's. There was another place outside on the curve going toward Oklahoma. It was more of a roadhouse situation. It was called Toots's Club, and it was in an old railway car, an old passenger railway car, one of these big, long ones. It was there for years and years. Of course, it's gone now, but it certainly was a landmark.
So where'd you go get your favorite hamburger before the racing after midnight?
There was no place after midnight, but before midnight, Murphy's Restaurant was good. There was a little place just half a block off of Route 66 that was very famous, Annie and Goldie's. And it had been there for decades, and it probably had the best hamburgers around, and they were, as I recall, they were 15 cents.
Got to love that.
Yeah. They weren't very big. They were small, but when I was in grade school, would go and get hamburgers at Annie and Goldie's.
Let me ask you this, Mac. Did you ever make the full route all the way to California on 66 or no?
Well, yes, I eventually did, at least. I haven't, not the full route from Chicago to Santa Monica. I would say probably from outside St. Louis to Santa Monica. But I can tell you that growing up in Baxter, I used to stand at night, and of course I've always been a night owl, so I would roam the town at night, but I used to stand on 66, and I used to think about where it ended in Santa Monica, and that's where I always wanted to be. It was just, I didn't know how I was going to get there, but that's where I wanted to be, and never made it except to visit. But I sure had a lot of adventures along the way, and a lot of my books have taken place along Route 66 or in those areas. I remember one in particular, Canyon Diablo, which takes place in Arizona in the 1870s. It's near a little place. And I actually did the research there. I dragged my editor there one summer, and this was Gary. He was dying because of the heat and stuff. I insisted we visit Two Guns, Arizona, and a little service station, and a little roadside attraction, and then walk down to the rim of Canyon Diablo so I could get a look at it for myself. A pretty impressive country there. You probably know it much better than I do, Bob.
Well, the fascinating thing is I got this, what would I call it, a Instagram Reels, little film clip kind of a thing. And there's this young kid, and he's developing an entire, what would you call it? It's Red Dead Redemption, that whole kind of gaming kind of filmology kind of spread thing about that canyon. And I asked him about it, and I said, why are you so intrigued with this? And he just thinks it's the coolest thing ever. So you're not alone there.
Oh, I agree with him. The whole story of Canyon Diablo, and of course the story of the railway making it to the canyon, and then not having enough money to build the bridge. Well, that's not quite the case, but it certainly makes a good story. And that bridge, or the way it looked, was quite dramatic. And so yeah.
Now the one version I heard, I don't even know if this is true now that you mention it, but one version was they shipped the track out there, and they were off by 5 feet, and so the track didn't make it across. Have you heard that one?
That's the version that I had heard that first got me fascinated about that particular spot. I'm not sure that that's true. I've read other things later that says maybe that was a bit of an exaggeration. I know the bridge was fabricated elsewhere. There at Two Guns, I'd done some research on that, and there was there's still the ruins of the rock ruins of the little service station and stuff. And at Two Guns there was also a little zoo, and they had things like panthers in this zoo, which kind of blows my mind to think about that you're going across, the desert in the 1930s and stop here at this little place, and there's this zoo with these exotic animals in it. What a deal.
Yeah, I think those roadside stops are just a part of everybody's heritage of driving cross country. And as the interstates took over from the old U.S. highways, fewer and fewer of those existed. But I know I spent any time that you could get your parents to get off the main road, and my dad loved leaving the interstates. And for years we had to travel US 60 on the back roads from basically outside of Blythe to Phoenix, because they were, US 10 it took most of the 60s and 70s to finish 10 crossing the California desert to all the way to Phoenix. But those little roadside zoos, to this day, Williams, I think, said, why give up on that great idea? And so you can go to Arizona, and then there's also the famous deer park. Both are just outside of Williams, and so Williams remains one of the great stops on Route 66 where you can get a taste of the past and the present of traveling the historic Mother Road.
How neat. Have you ever heard of the Spook Light?
No, I don't think I have, Bob.
What was it?
The Spook Light, the Tri-State Spook Light?
No.
It's not too far off of Route 66. As you would take Route 66 into Oklahoma at Commerce, you would turn south, and then not too far from there, you would arrive at the Devil's Promenade area, and there is one of the most famous mystery lights in the country. Of course, the Marfa lights gets a lot of the attention, or the Blue Ridge Mountain lights back east, but here we have our very own phenomena that had been documented since the 30s. And I remember as a kid, my parents and my older brother taking us out there to see the Spook Light, and it was something to see. I still don't know what it was. Now you go there, and I think mostly what people are seeing are car lights, but what I saw was something inexplicable, and I know that my brother saw it many times too. He saw it once so bright that he was afraid it was going to set the woods on fire, and it would float along. Later, I went out when I got a job at the newspaper. I was going to write a story about the Spook Light, so I went out, took 66, turned south at Commerce, went there, and then got the car stuck in a big in an intersection that was muddy. It had been raining, and so it was just clay. Wheels were spinning. Didn't know what to do. It was dark out, and then my wife at the time and I we saw this light in the distance swaying toward us, and I thought, well, here comes the Spook Light. And then it gets closer and closer and sways back and forth, and there's this unearthly sound, this unearthly moan that accompanies it, and scared the living daylights out of us. And then this kid walks forward with this kerosene lantern and says, "Yeah, people get stuck here all the time. You want my dad to get his tractor to pull you out." So, funny in retrospect, it was pretty scary at the time and kind of interesting. So,
I love it. The legends of the Mother Road, Baxter Springs. Well, I'm going to take you guys out of this show here just with a couple of comments from both of you. Bob and I have spent a lot of time talking about AM radio and radio at nighttime, and who had the first FM radio or first 8-track tape. So I want to hear a little bit about listening to late night radio along Baxter Springs when you're trying to get some rock and roll on the radio there. Max?
Oh, absolutely. It was always an iffy proposition to find a good rock and roll station. And I would, in bed at night with my transistor radio, I would spin the dial trying to find a good station. And it seems to me that WLS in Chicago was the best station to listen to. So I would, listen to that at night in my bedroom, and then it was close enough to 66 that, we could hear the whoosh of cars, or I could hear the whoosh of cars going up and down and all night. And, the more I think about that, the more I think that Route 66, Mark Twain had the river. I think for a lot of us, Route 66 was our river. I know it certainly was mine. It took me to all the places in my life that would be significant, some of them embarrassing, like I'm talking about, being thrown in jail for drag racing and stuff. But it was a road of discovery, and it was a road of promise. So.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. I think, and Max, I think you're absolutely right. I think you've nailed it. That was our river. It was. It really is. It was the Mississippi River flowing toward the promised land of the West Coast. Really well said.
Well, Bob and
tell
Max.
Me, what are the best? What's the best road song? You got a car. Is there a song that when you heard it come on, you'd go 15 miles an hour faster?
Oh yeah, Golden Earring, Radar Love, hands down.
Radar Love. That's I'm sorry, son. That's a 20 miles an hour faster.
And Bob, what's yours?
Oh, I have so many. Jumpin' Jack Flash always gets my motor running. And the Stones are so great. I was Satisfaction, all of those just rockin' tunes. But I gotta say that this always upsets my boomer compadres, but I don't think anybody has improved upon Highway to Hell by AC/DC. That's a car song, dude.
That is a great one. Yeah.
Well, Bob, Boze Bell, and Max McCoy, thank you all for being on this great episode of Two Lane Tales. Max, we'll have you back on here very soon. And we had a great time today, and we will get we're gonna have to follow up on the outlaws of Route 66 and the strange phenomena of the Mother Road. And so thank you both, and we're gonna send this back to Stan. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, Mike McCoy. You really are the real McCoy when it comes to the stories of Route 66. And, of course, the cars that rode on them and raced on them. And thank you for bringing back some fond memories and perhaps reminding us that maybe we, too, are a little bit lucky to be alive. Hey, thank you so much for being a part of our program, and we trust that you will recommend us to others, but most importantly, you'll come back again and enjoy the ride. All the best. Take care, drive safely, and bye for now.
It's okay on the Route 66. It's okay on the Route 66.